session, Reforming International Cooperation for Achieving SDG10 by Ms. Carina Lange. Ms. Carina is a multifaceted international professional, mainly working as a researcher and an independent consultant. Ms. Carina used to work in different functions of the German Development Corporation as a head of project and advisor on employment and professional education, as well as an advisor in EU affairs and donor coordination. She has a thematic focus on digital transformation and sustainable development. Formerly, she used to be the German youth delegate to the United Nations, where she represented youth in Germany at the United Nations and built bridges between the global institution, national politics, and young people. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Carina. Over to you for your session, Reforming International Cooperation for Achieving SDG10.
Thank you a lot for the introduction, and thanks a lot for having me here. So I'm very much looking forward to talk about how to reform international cooperation to achieve SDG 10 today. And as we already heard before, the pandemic is even increasing global inequalities in between and within countries. So this is getting an even more important topic. And at the same time, ODA, the official development assistance, and as well humanitarian aid are rising. So it's a very important topic, I think, to ask ourselves how can inequalities even rise more at the moment when actually ODA is going up. So I think it's a very important question. And in order to put you into the setting a bit more, to get to know the perspective from where I'm speaking to you, I would like to introduce myself a little more. So this is me in picture so that you get a short glimpse. So I'm based in Togo since 2017, and I've been working in different international organizations, just as Apana said before. And I used to be a German UN Youth delegate, so you see that on the pictures as well. And I've been involved a lot in international exchange formats, and I'm working a lot on the future of learning, digital transformation, and cooperation. So this is me in just a few pictures and words. And of course, I would love to get to know you, but unfortunately, this is not possible in the short time we're having. But I was told that you are entrepreneurs, or you're working in an enterprise, you're SDG passionates or government officials mostly. And so I think that you're all working across borders as well. So you are part of international cooperation, and this you are all key to achieve SDG 10. So most likely, as much as for me, international cooperation is a topic of frustration for you as well, because there's just so much money and there's so little results in the end. Inequalities are even rising, and corruption, for example, is still very present. So it's a very complex topic, and it's a very, very big question to answer in 15 minutes, actually, on how can we reform international cooperation. So I would propose to give you some food for thought, actually, so that we can imagine some ways on how we could do international cooperation differently together in the future. So I'd like to ask you some questions. You're part of the system again. Voila. If you always say it's the system's fault, we are only distributing the fault to actually some anonymous entity, and this is actually not helping anyone, and nothing is going to change. So by putting the blame on just the anonymous system, we are just we're not creating change, and we are even putting our energy in a system that is not really working. So we need to shift our perspective as well. So let's try to think from there, from you and me, and how we could change or bring a little bit of change into that system, giving back power to us and to our capacity to design and to create a different setting. So there we go for the questions. So what if our understanding of inequalities is actually part of the problem? Inequalities always suggest a lack, and a lack is that something is missing and there's a difference compared to an optimal situation. But I would like to ask you is, what is actually that optimal situation? Because in most settings, it's the so-called global north that is taken as an ideal. And however, the global north has very bad effects on the environment, for example. So one cannot really tell or say that this is an ideal or the optimal situation. And this is why I'd like to challenge a bit that notion of what do we consider as equal and what is the optimal situation. And often in international cooperation, it's the global north. And this is why we are focusing on that model, and we are kind of closing ourselves up to other models because there might just be other solutions in different contexts as well. So this is like the first takeaway, maybe, that in order to reform international cooperation, we ourselves need to challenge our visions and the goals we set in international cooperation projects. So maybe we need to open up and just create other ideas and other settings, other visions, and build something new, and not just try to copy something that is working badly, actually, in other contexts. What if we are not getting it right? That's a bit provocative, actually, because one of the things that I've noticed in my work in different international cooperation projects is that the distribution of power is very unequal, and there's a lot of experts in that system, or so-called experts, that are actually, I think, part of the problem, because they are numbing alternative solutions. There's often people who are coming to very different contexts that they don't really know themselves, and that presenting solutions that they have imagined, but actually there might be other local solutions that are numbed through that approach, actually. So working on an equal footing has been a principle of international cooperation since a long time, but I think it is not used at its full potential yet, and trying to focus more on that would really make a difference. So if you want to reform international cooperation in your work, try to work on your humility and self-knowledge as well. And part of this is saying that, okay, I might not have all the answers, and I can't predict all the events that might happen, but I'm open. I'm open to other answers, and I'm open to exchanging, for example, with local populations or with the government I'm working with. And even if you know what works in one place, that doesn't mean that it works in another place. So also that humility to say, okay, maybe we really need different solutions in different contexts. And that's also getting comfortable with a very huge part, actually, of messiness and unpredictability that is just existing in that system. And a big part of that, I already mentioned that briefly, is giving way to local knowledge and feedback, actually, because often, because of that unequal distribution of power, many very good ideas or approaches or different perspectives are just not being listened to. So I think you always need to ask yourself, okay, maybe I'm not getting it right. Maybe there's another option. And I think part of a first step into a reform of international cooperation on our level is asking ourselves if we are actually getting it right. The last quick question is, what if we de-dramatized? I think that is one of the biggest problems of international cooperation as well. It's kind of the drama of development, that we are always portraying poor people or people who are suffering from inequalities as victims of different things, of famine, of disasters, of whatever is happening to them. And of course, this is bad, but we are only putting them in a place of beneficiaries of a very passive space, where they are told that actually they cannot do anything. And this is very, very dangerous, actually, because we're taking the power from them. And a shift in that approach, I think, would really make a difference at many levels of international corporations. So if you want to reform international cooperation and you want to start today, ask yourself in any relationship how the power is distributed, who are the uppers, who are the downers in the system you're working in, no matter who you are, no matter where you're working at, but keep that in mind, and keep in mind how you're portraying the people you're working with, you're working for, you're working or you're trying to help in a sense, because I think helping also is a word that needs to be challenged. And then one last food for thought is, get to know yourself before you want to change and help others. And I think this is, it seems very very simple, but I think it's one of the most difficult parts. And I think many people go to international development, international cooperation to feel better themselves. And actually, what I think is very important before you want to help others, try to help yourself first. So understand your drivers, know yourself, know your motivation, and acknowledge your own problems and maybe your dark sides. Then you can really make a change, because many people who are working in international cooperation, they want to heal something in themselves and do their work because of that. And actually, this is really making or changing the energy in what you're working on. And especially in a globalized world, since there are no fixed structures, there's very little organization only, and everything is free. There's like no value system that is fixed. So you need to fix your own value system in order to find your space and in order to not be lost in that system. I think that sounds simple, but I think it's a very big problem in international cooperation, and it's a lot of work that can be done or should be done. So let's start to build the systems that look like us, SDG activists. Let's say no at some points, and let's stick to our values that we identified before. And I'm very convinced that if you start to act differently, others will do so too. And just being yourself and sticking to your values is somehow a very radical act in a system that was built on very different principles than what you might be believing in. So get back your power. That's my main message, because otherwise it seems often very overwhelming, that international cooperation system that is just dysfunctional and that seems too huge. And I could have told about like the different reforms that one could do, but I really don't want to bore you with that, but really look at what could you do, what can we do to make a difference. And I think that's what the SDGs are all about in a sense. So nurture your curiosity and try to understand the systems you're working in, and keep the desire to actually really take action and not just talk about it. I think that's really what makes a difference. And I think if you, wherever you are, wherever you're working at, in an enterprise, at government, at an international organization, if you stay curious and you're challenging your own position all the time, you're really contributing to you might not call it a reform, but it's a shift in international cooperation. And I think it's only with people who are working in the system that a change can really be made. And I'm very hopeful, because I think that many people are changing their attitudes, and I'm very convinced that together we can really do that effort or that change and contribute to it. So I hope that these few questions gave you some interesting food for thought. And again, thanks a lot for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carina, for that wonderful session. Your questions were really thought-provoking. And as you said, if we have a shift in our thought process and if we get to know ourselves first, it would make a huge difference. And we'll be able to create the change we wish to see in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now we'll take a short break.